Hey, everybody. Welcome to CrafterCast. CrafterCast are short podcasts focused on specific and interesting topics related to modern content management. I'm Mike Fertel, and with me today here is Russ Danner. Today, we're going to talk about decoupled CMS architectures. So, Russ, what is a decoupled CMS architecture?
Decoupled CMS architecture is when you separate authoring and delivery. You decouple those two sets of responsibilities so that they're their own unique systems.
Perfect. Now let's compare and contrast a decoupled architecture from a headless architecture, because many vendors talk about decoupled when they really mean headless. So decoupled is really an overloaded term in the industry. Let's break that apart.
Yeah, I think the reason why people say decoupled now with headless is that you're decoupling the CMS and the presentation tier, and software developers are always talking about coupling. So there's all kinds of coupling here and there, and that's an easy term to get overloaded. But we prefer the term headless because it is very specific about what is decoupled in that part of the conversation. So headless is just decoupling the presentation tier from the CMS, and the CMS delivers content as an API response to whatever is consuming the content, so that you can more easily support multi-channel digital experiences.
Right. So again, we talk about decoupled in the more traditional sense, going back 20 plus years of original content management systems, which some were coupled, some were decoupled. And that original sense of the term, decoupled architecture, is where the authoring system is decoupled and separate from the content delivery system, each of which can be still headless, right? They could still have their APIs for the authoring tools and on the authoring side, and API first headless on the delivery side. But the decoupled term we're using is that traditional term of authoring decoupled from delivery. So Russ, let's talk about some specific tool examples. What are some vendors or some tools that are coupled, not decoupled?
So a great example that everybody would understand is something like WordPress, right? There's billions of WordPress sites out there. And if you think about it, WordPress has it's a single application where you author content, and it's the same system that delivers the website. And the only thing between, whether your content is live or not live is basically a checkbox in the UI and a flag in the database. It's a very common example of a coupled system, and there's others. Drupal is a great example of that. LifeRay in the Java space is a great example of that. So headless CMSs, there's great examples there too, like Contentful, Content Stack, and so on.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's WordPress or Drupal or those in those communities that sometimes use the word decoupled. To what they really mean is headless, right? They do have kind of bolt-on APIs on top of their stack, on top of their coupled architecture, and so that's really a headless or headless-like approach. It's not truly decoupled.
Right.
So why do people care? Why do we care about coupling versus decoupling of the authoring and delivery systems? Let's talk about some of the benefits of a decoupled CMS architecture.
By separating authoring and delivery, you get a lot of benefits. So the first one would be security. You separate those two systems, that you're pushing apart two different code bases, and if these systems do a lot, which they tend to do. I mean, on the authoring side, there's a lot of great tools there. And on the delivery side, there's personalization and response marshaling and all kinds of capabilities there. By separating those two code bases, you have smaller attack vectors that you can secure independently. And that's a big deal from a security perspective. Another piece of the security puzzle is that sites and authoring tools tend to have different, they have different users, obviously, so they usually have different authentication and authorization systems. On the inside of where you're doing your authoring, you tend to authenticate against things like LDAP and Active Directory and your internal SAML2 and so on. And your live site, you've got a user database somewhere that you're managing. So that's a completely different set of authentication and authorization that you want to be able to manage. So there's security, it's really clear, the big advantage there. There's also scalability and performance and cost benefits, because when you make that code base smaller, it's more easy to distribute and scale them independently, so you can right size the infrastructure for the particular audience. And then also, because you've got let's say a purpose-built delivery, a system that just does delivery, you can make that much more scalable, because it can be built to scale in the way that it needs to scale, and it doesn't have to be worried about how authoring tools work and so on. So there's a huge amount of benefits on the surface, and then even when you get inside about how things are built, how software is built, there's another set of benefits there, which probably don't have time to get into.
Right. And as you talk about security and scalability, separation of concerns comes to mind, and cost benefits comes to mind, right? That when you're able to tailor the authoring environment specifically for your authors, whether it's a team of 2 or a team of 50, you tailor that environment and the deployment, whether that's just locally in one region of the world or globally. You can focus on that and tailor that environment for exactly what your authoring needs are, authoring and publishing needs are. And then for your delivery, again, you can tailor that. And with coupled systems, you have to replicate the entire stack, right? Everywhere your end users are, even though your authors might not need it. So cost of software licensing and support, cost of maintenance and operations is another big factor in coupled architectures, bringing software along where you don't need it, and decoupled architectures allow you to tailor each environment specifically to the needs of each system's users.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the key thing is separation of concerns, good old design patterns at every level of software and software deployment. By separating the concerns, you can optimize for that concern, and authoring and delivery are really 2 different things that only have very specific integration points. And by separating them, you can tailor make a solution for your needs. And I think that's important, especially when you're talking about, these large scale enterprise sites and, high traffic volume sites and things like that. You don't have the kind of capacity for all this extra junk hanging on, all these bolt-ons that don't bring any value in that particular part of the use case.
Right. And I think that's an important part of it as well. Is there's a lot of different types of websites, a lot of different types of web app, mobile app needs. For the simpler ones, for blog sites, for simple corporate sites, a WordPress Drupal is perfect, right? It's fine. But for most mid to large enterprises and fast growing startups, they need a decoupled architecture, a decoupled CMS to separate those concerns and tailor the needs to specifically for their enterprise. So that's great. I think that's kind of really summarizes decoupling, what a decoupled CMS architecture is. So let's put a wrap on this one. Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this useful, please hit the like button and share this with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're going to be doing more of these CrafterCasts on a weekly basis going forward. Feel free to comment below on any topics you'd love to hear us talk about.